In 1881, when archaeologists in a Cairo museum unwrapped a 3,000-year-old mummy, the sight that greeted them left them horrified. The queen's mummy was frozen in a screaming position, mouth agape, face twisted in agony, as if the terrifying moments of her death were eternally preserved. The story behind this mummy forms one of history's darkest pages. In a civilization that had mastered the art of mummification, encountering such a sight was nearly impossible. Egyptians, due to their beliefs in the afterlife, prepared their mummies in the most respectful and peaceful manner. So what had happened to this queen that the terror of her death moment remained frozen on her face forever? Our story begins during the collapse years of the New Kingdom period, around 1070 BCE. Egypt was no longer as powerful as it once was. Invasions by the Sea peoples from the north, rebellions from Nubia in the south, and threats from Assyrians in the east had weakened the empire. Civil wars, economic crises, and religious conflicts had torn the country apart. During this chaotic period, even the royal family was struggling to survive. In the city of Thebes, in a royal palace that had lost its former glory, lived a young princess named Henhutemheb. She was one of the last representatives of the 21 dynasty period. This young woman, only 17 years old, was beloved by the people for her black hair, breathtaking beauty, and intelligent gaze. The nobility she inherited from her mother Ankhesenamun, and the charisma from the royal blood in her father's veins made her a natural leader. However, her beauty and royal blood would become the beginning of the nightmare she would experience. Henhutemheb had been different since childhood. Unlike other princesses, she loved reading books, learning history, and talking with the people. She would walk along the banks of the Nile River, talk with farmers, and listen to their troubles. This behavior disturbed the conservative circles around the palace. For a princess to be so close to the people was considered contrary to traditions. When Henhutemheb's father, Penujum III, died, she was only 17 years old. Royal tradition was very strict. If there was no male heir, the throne would pass to the eldest daughter. Henhutemheb had two younger brothers, but both had died of illness in childhood. This meant that Henhutemheb should ascend to the throne. But this situation brought a major problem in terms of the power balance in the palace. One of the most powerful figures in the palace was High Priest Amenemheb. This man in his 40s, tall, with sunken cheeks and sharp eyes, had been leading the Temple of Ammon for years. He was the leader of the priest class and a major landowner. At the same time, he had a distant kinship tie with the royal family. His great-great-grandmother had married someone from the royal family 3 generations ago. This blood tie gave him the opportunity to claim rights to the throne. Amenemheb had been secretly gathering power for years. He had taken control of temple treasures, formed alliances with landowners, and won over some commanders in the army. He believed that Egypt needed a strong male leader against foreign threats. Henhutemheb's existence was a major obstacle to his long-term plans. As soon as the princess ascended to the throne after her father's death, she faced a major conspiracy. Amenemheb began questioning her competence using various excuses. Her young age, inexperience, being a woman. He used every argument to belittle her in the eyes of the people and palace officials. One night, during an official banquet, Amenemheb approached the young queen. In his gold-embroidered priest robes, with a fake smile, he proposed marriage to her. This marriage would both comply with religious traditions and legally give him the right to ascend to the throne. He made the proposal in very diplomatic language. "My queen, in these difficult times, Egypt needs strong unity. If my experience and your lineage unite, we can restore our country to its former glory." However, Henhutemheb sensed Amenemheb's true intentions very well. She knew he was an old, ruthless man who was only hungry for power. Moreover, there were rumors circulating in the palace. It was talked about that Amenemheb's previous wife, Nefertari, had died under suspicious circumstances. The young queen politely but firmly rejected the proposal. "Honorable High Priest, I do not yet need personal ties like marriage to serve my country." This rejection drove Amenemheb mad with rage. He saw that the strategy he had been planning for years had collapsed with a single move. Now he began making other, darker plans. If he couldn't obtain Henhutemheb through legal means, he would have to physically eliminate her. The high priest had a man he trusted for this job, the palace's chief physician Khemwaset. This 50-year-old, medium-height man with crooked teeth had been the royal family's private doctor for years. He was also a great expert in mummification. Most importantly, Amenemheb had a large debt to him. He had previously taken gold from him for temple constructions. Khemwaset was morally weak in character. He was ready to do any kind of work for money. When Amenemheb approached him, he hesitated at first, but the high priest both offered him a large amount of gold and promised to cancel his debts. Moreover, he guaranteed that if the plan was successful, he would rise to even higher positions in the new administration. The plan was prepared very insidiously and cunningly. Instead of giving Henhutemheb a poison with immediate effect, they would use a slow-acting method. This way, her death would appear natural and no one would suspect anything. Khemwaset prepared an arsenic-based mixture. This poison, when given in small doses, would first show mild discomfort symptoms, then gradually draw a worsening disease picture. Amenemheb's plan seemed truly perfect. If Henhutemheb died from an illness, no one would harbor suspicion of murder. Then he would claim the throne as the closest male relative and easily succeed the queen. The people, after long uncertainty, would support him in their search for a strong leader. The poisoning process required meticulous preparation lasting months. Khemwaset began mixing the arsenic mixture into the queen's daily meals in very small doses. For the first few weeks, Henhutemheb only felt mild fatigue and occasional headaches. The symptoms were so innocent and common that no one suspected anything. The queen's daily routine was not very different from normal. She would wake up early in the morning, deal with state affairs, listen to people's petitions in the afternoon, and devote her evenings to education and reading. It was natural for her to be tired due to this intense schedule. Those around her attributed her fatigue to the stress brought by new responsibilities, however. As weeks passed, the symptoms began to worsen. Henhutemheb's appetite decreased. Her sleep pattern was disrupted. Her skin began to take on a slightly yellowish color. There was thinning in her hair. Khemwaset began regularly examining the queen to evaluate the situation. The doctor was playing a very clever game. He made a false diagnosis, saying that Henhutemheb had contracted a rare blood disease. He claimed that this disease was very difficult to treat, but that he could cure her with his special knowledge and medicines. He also said the disease might be contagious and began isolating the queen from other people. This isolation tactic was the most important part of the plan. The more isolated Henhutemheb became, the fewer people would closely monitor her condition. Moreover, the queen's weakening state would not be seen by the people and would not arouse suspicion. The queen had complete trust in Khemwaset. The doctor had served her family for years and had treated her father when he was ill. It never crossed the queen's mind that he could betray her. This trust would be the biggest factor leading to Henhutemheb's. And as months passed, the symptoms of arsenic poisoning became more pronounced. The queen's hair began falling out rapidly. Numbness began in her hands and feet. She constantly felt nauseous and vomited. Her skin became increasingly yellow. Purple circles formed under her eyes. Her body weight was dropping rapidly. Khemwaset said these symptoms were the natural course of the disease. He even claimed that the condition was a sign of improvement, proof that the body was fighting the disease. He told Henhutemheb that the medicines he gave her were beginning to show effect and asked her to be patient during this process. Only one person in the palace began to suspect the situation: Henhutemheb's closest friend and lady-in-waiting, Nefertiti. This young woman, who had been friends with the queen since childhood, sensed that something was strange about the situation. Henhutemheb's rapid illness seemed very odd to her. Nefertiti began conducting her own secret investigations. She examined old records in the palace library, researched the illness and death records of previous royal family members. Her research made her even more worried. There were many people who had died with similar symptoms, and most of them were patients treated by Khemwaset. What caught her attention most was the death of Amenemheb's previous wife, Nefertari. According to records, she had also fallen ill with similar symptoms and died. Her treatment had also been done by Khemwaset. This was too much of a coincidence. Nefertiti tried to tell her suspicions to Henhutemheb. However, the queen was so ill that her thinking ability and concentration skills had seriously decreased. Arsenic poisoning was also affecting her brain. She was now having difficulty making rational decisions. She considered Nefertiti's words as paranoia and told her not to be overly suspicious of others. Khemwaset said the queen's condition had become very critical, and they had to try one last treatment method. This last hope medicine was actually a mixture containing very high doses of arsenic. The aim was to quickly kill Henhutemheb and end this long process. On the night the medicine was given, terrible events occurred. Henhutemheb began suffering unbearable pain. The final and most severe stage of arsenic poisoning had begun. The stomach cramps were so severe that they doubled her body over. She couldn't breathe. Her heart was palpitating. Every moment was real torture. The queen couldn't understand the cause of the pain she was experiencing. She only felt unbearable agony and screamed for help in desperation. Yellow foam came from her mouth. Her body went into uncontrolled spasms. Her eyes opened wide with terror. She looked around but couldn't recognize anyone. Nefertiti came running. When she heard her friend's screams, the sight she saw confronted her with a shock she would never forget in her life. Henhutemheb was writhing in her bed, her body constantly convulsing. Her face was so contorted with pain that it became unrecognizable. The lady-in-waiting immediately ran to call for help, but it was already too late. Henhutemheb's final moments were truly unbearable. She continued to suffer terrible pain even while taking her last breath. In the final stage of arsenic poisoning, all her organs were collapsing simultaneously. Her face was so contorted with pain that her mouth remained frozen open as if to scream. Her eyes were open with terror and agony, her last gaze fixed on the ceiling. The terror of the death moment would live forever in her facial expression. Khemwaset claimed that the queen's death was from natural causes, that she had succumbed to the illness she had been suffering from for a long time. Amenemheb, meanwhile, staged a great mourning show, shedding fake tears. He immediately presented himself as a candidate for the throne as the closest male heir. Emphasizing the urgency of the situation, he said Egypt should not experience a leadership vacuum. However, Nefertiti knew the truth. She was absolutely certain that her friend had been murdered, but she couldn't find concrete evidence. Moreover, Amenemheb was now in a powerful position and had begun making threats to silence her. It was clear that the young woman's life was in mortal danger when the mummification process began. Procedures very different from normal royal tradition were performed. Khemwaset said he would personally undertake this process. He claimed that Henhutemheb needed a special mummification process, that normal procedures couldn't be applied due to her illness. The doctor used a very special and suspicious method during mummification. In normal procedures, body organs were removed, treated with special chemicals, and the face was prepared to preserve its natural appearance as much as possible. However, Khemwaset did not put Henhutemheb's face through normal mummification procedures. The real reason for this was to hide the traces that arsenic poisoning left in the body. Arsenic remains in the body for a long time and can be detected in hair, nail, and tissue samples. Fearing future examinations, Khemwaset was trying to eliminate these traces. The doctor applied much stronger chemicals than normal mummification substances to the queen's face and body. These chemicals were supposed to chemically neutralize arsenic traces. However, this process produced an unexpected and incalculable result. The powerful chemicals used had the effect of literally freezing Henhutemheb's facial expression. At the moment of death, the screaming mouth, eyes wide with terror, eyebrows furrowed with pain, everything remained exactly as it was. The chemicals hardened the facial muscles in that position. After the mummy was prepared, Khemwaset entered a complete effort to hide the situation. He didn't tell anyone where Henhutemheb's grave was. He buried her in a desolate place, far from other royal tombs. He didn't even write identity information on the gravestone. Amenemheb managed to ascend to the throne as he had planned. He ruled for about 3 years, but never gained the people's real support. Henhutemheb's mysterious and sudden death constantly left question marks in people's minds. Moreover, his administrative skills were very weak. 3 years later, Henhutemheb also died under suspicious circumstances. Some claimed he was also poisoned. Perhaps Khemwaset had killed him too to be the sole keeper of secrets. Or perhaps Nefertiti had taken her revenge. Khemwaset, unable to bear the weight of his conscience, began showing signs of madness. He constantly said he saw Henhutemheb's ghost and screamed at night. Finally, he died after completely losing his mind. Nefertiti continued searching for the truth as long as she lived. She tried to learn the location of her friend's grave, but Khemwaset had taken his secret to the grave. Thousands of years passed. Egypt's royal dynasties changed. The empire collapsed. New civilizations were born and disappeared. Henhutemheb's story was completely forgotten. Even her name was erased from records. In 1881, a German archaeologist named Emil Bruch was excavating at Deir el-Bahari. He discovered a secret burial chamber. Inside were about 40 mummies. These were royal mummies collected from different places to protect them from grave robbers. Among the mummies was a mysterious female mummy bearing no identifying marks. Bruch and his team decided to examine her like the other mummies. When they unwrapped the bandages, the sight they encountered deeply shook the entire team. The female mummy was in the most horrifying position seen in museum history. Her face was contorted with pain, her mouth wide open as if screaming, her eyes enlarged with terror. This was the strangest and most disturbing sight ever seen in mummification history. Archaeologists researched the identity of this mummy for years, but they couldn't find any records, any signs. The mummy was catalogued as Unknown Woman B and began being displayed in the Cairo Museum. Modern scientific analysis conducted in the 20th century revealed surprising results. High amounts of arsenic were found in the mummy's tissue samples. This was definitive proof that she had been poisoned. Moreover, it was understood that the mummification method was very different from standard royal procedures. The chemicals used in the facial area were much stronger than normal mummification substances. This was a clear sign of someone's effort to hide evidence. DNA analysis showed that the mummy definitely came from royal lineage. It was determined to belong to the 21 dynasty period. Age determination showed she was between 17 to 20 years old at the time of death. Modern forensic techniques even revealed how the arsenic poisoning was carried out. It was determined that long-term, low-dose arsenic was given, and finally a very high dose of arsenic was administered. All findings strongly indicated that this could be Henhutemheb's mummy. Thousands of years later, the queen's screaming mummy was telling the horrifying story she had lived. Henhutemheb's story was a dark tale of power, betrayal, and revenge. At only 17 years old, she had been most cruelly betrayed by the people she trusted most. The queen's screaming mummy was history's silent but powerful witness. Even thousands of years later, she was telling the world about the horrifying moments she had lived. The terror of the death moment remained frozen on her face forever. This story shows us that truth always comes out, no matter how much it's tried to be hidden. Justice finds its place sooner or later. Henhutemheb's mummy is the most powerful and terrifying proof of this truth.